U.S. President Donald Trump's former campaign manager Paul Manafort departs U.S. District Court after a hearing in the first charges stemming from a special counsel investigation of possible Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election in Washington. Photo Jim Borgreuters. Donald Trump's election campaign chairman was yesterday charged with secretly lobbying for a pro-Russian party in Ukraine in exchange for millions of dollars. Paul Manafort, who held the campaign role for 3 months, was accused of working for the Party of Regions group for around a decade without telling U.S. authorities. During that time, his firm is alleged to have met with congressmen about sanctions against Ukraine and to have defended the controversial arrest of a political rival. Mr. Manafort also faces charges of laundering money through foreign companies and bank accounts and misleading the authorities about the true scale of his lobbying. In a dramatic day in Washington, D.C., both Mr. Manafort and his colleague Richard Gates handed themselves into the FBI after being told they would be indicted. Together they faced 12 charges including conspiracy against the United States, conspiracy to launder money, and being an unregistered agent of a foreign principal. Money laundering, the most serious charge, carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. Mr. Manafort and Mr. Gates deny the charges. Government lawyers requested that Mr. Manafort's bail be set at $10 million €8.58 million and Mr. Gaddis at $5 million €4.3 million. Both are under house arrest. Mr. Manafort's attorney said there was no evidence his client or the Trump campaign colluded with Russia and called the allegations ridiculous. The charges are the first to be brought by an official investigation into the Trump campaign's links with Russia, led by Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller. Mr. Trump and the White House last night said the charges were not directly linked to Mr. Manafort's time with the campaign and dismissed any suggestion of collusion with Russia. Mr. Trump tweeted, "Sorry, but this is years ago, before Paul Manafort was part of the Trump campaign. But why aren't crooked Hillary the Dems the focus?" Commentators suggest the arrests may be used to encourage Mr. Manafort to share information with investigators in return for leniency. The developments marked another twist in the story of Mr. Trump's ties to Russia that has continued to dog his first year in the White House, to the fury of the president. Mr. Manafort is an experienced operative who advised previous Republican presidential candidates, including Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. He was taken on by the Trump campaign in March 2016 to secure the delegate votes needed to wrap up the Republican presidential nomination. In May, Mr. Manafort was promoted to campaign chairman and chief strategist, a position he held until August, when he resigned, as reports about his links to Ukraine began to surface. In a 31-page document published by the Department of Justice yesterday, Mr. Manafort and Mr. Gates were accused of overseeing a multi-million-dollar lobbying campaign that was never declared between 2006 and 2015. The work was said to have been on behalf of Party of Regions, the Ukrainian political group known for its pro-Russian sentiments. The party's leader, Viktor Yanukovych, became Ukrainian president in 2010 before fleeing in 2014 after an uprising that resulted in fighting in the east of the country. Mr. Manafort and Mr. Gates, his right-hand man, were accused of using 2 Washington, D.C. companies to lobby American politicians on behalf of the Ukrainian party. Among other things, they lobbied multiple members of Congress and their staffs about Ukraine sanctions, the validity of Ukraine elections, and the propriety of Yanukovych's imprisoning his presidential rival, the indictment reads. They also fed back the information to their Ukrainian paymasters, according to the charges, with Mr. Manafort telling Mr. Yanukovych in 2012 that he would provide a weekly update on progress. The pair never told the U.S. authorities of the work. It is illegal to act as a foreign agent seeking United States influence, one of the charges both men now face. Copyright Daily Telegraph, London, Irish Independent.